blown out of his chest. And I was like, really? Really? That's what they did with Hicks?
He was the soldier fans rooted for. Calm, loyal, and unshakably brave. Michael Biehn's Corporal Hicks wasn't just another Marine in Aliens. He was the heart of that squad, the one who made survival feel possible. But when Alien 3 hit theaters, fans were blindsided. Hicks was gone. No farewell, no explanation, just erased. What happened behind those studio doors still feels like a betrayal. Not just to Biehn, but to every fan who believed Hicks was the future of the franchise. And when the truth came out about secret rewrites, heated negotiations, and a payout that shocked even Biehn himself, it became clear this was never just a creative decision. This was personal.
Before the chaos of Alien 3, there was a time when Michael Biehn could do no wrong. He was Hollywood's go-to man for intense, quiet strength, the kind of actor who didn't need flashy lines to command a scene. Born in Alabama and raised in Arizona, Biehn worked his way up through small television roles before landing a breakthrough in The Terminator as Kyle Reese, the soldier sent back in time to protect humanity's future. That performance didn't just earn him recognition, it earned him respect. He had presence, that mix of grit and vulnerability audiences instantly trusted. So when James Cameron began casting for Aliens, he knew exactly who could bring Corporal Hicks to life. A character who wasn't the loudest, but the one who stood tall when everything fell apart. Hicks became the steady pulse of Aliens, a Marine who balanced Ripley's raw fear with tactical composure. He wasn't the action hero who yelled orders, he was the quiet protector. And fans noticed. By the end of Aliens, Hicks and Ripley were more than survivors. They were hope, a symbol of resilience in a universe overrun by terror. The chemistry between Sigourney Weaver and Biehn felt organic, almost like destiny. Which is exactly why, when audiences walked out of theaters in 1986, everyone assumed they'd see Hicks again. Bigger role, bigger future, bigger story. But Hollywood had other plans. And what came next would not just change the franchise. It would change Michael Biehn's faith in the system forever.
After the massive success of Aliens, everyone assumed the next film would be Hicks's story. Ripley had survived, yes, but Hicks was the soldier who could carry the fight forward, the man who had seen it all and still stood strong. And in the beginning, that's exactly what the studio planned. When writer William Gibson, yes, the same Gibson who coined the term cyberspace, turned in his draft for Alien 3, Hicks wasn't dead. He was front and center. The story shifted away from Ripley and followed Hicks leading a colony of soldiers against a new breed of Xenomorphs. Imagine that version of the movie. Darker, more political, more grounded in military science fiction. Hicks finally stepping into the leadership role fans expected. Even Biehn was told to stay ready. He'd be getting a call. But then, the rewrites started. One new director after another came on board. Vincent Ward, Rennie Harlin, and later, a young David Fincher. Each had a different vision, a different tone, a different script. And somewhere in that chaos, Hicks's story began to vanish. Executives grew nervous about continuing the action-heavy direction of Aliens. They wanted something more haunting, more spiritual, a return to horror. And in that shift, the soldier who symbolized hope no longer fit their new tone. By the time the final draft was approved, Hicks had gone from lead to missing, his story erased, his survival rewritten. And Michael Biehn, the man who had once been the face of courage in the franchise, didn't even know it yet.
When Alien 3 finally hit theaters in 1992, fans settled into their seats expecting to see Hicks again. Maybe scarred, maybe changed, but alive. After all,
The end of Aliens left him in cryosleep beside Ripley and young Newt. But then came the opening scene. The camera drifted across the wreckage of the escape pod from the Sulaco. Ripley lay alone. Hicks and Newt were gone, dead before the story even began. No hero's farewell, no sacrifice, no explanation, just a line in a computer report and a few haunting seconds of silence. For audiences who'd waited 6 years for the next chapter, it felt like a gut punch. Hicks, the man who represented stability, strength, and survival, was reduced to an off-screen casualty. And for Michael Biehn, the news was just as shocking. He wasn't called back to film. No discussion, no closure. He found out through industry chatter that his character had been killed off without him. To an actor who'd poured himself into creating Hicks's quiet humanity, it felt deeply personal. He later admitted he couldn't understand the decision. Why destroy what fans loved most about Aliens? But that decision didn't just disappoint one actor. It set off a wave of outrage that would echo through fan circles for decades. Because fans weren't just angry that Hicks was gone, they were furious at how he was erased. Fans didn't just dislike Alien 3, they felt betrayed by it. When the credits rolled and word spread that Hicks and Newt had been wiped out in the first few minutes, the backlash was immediate. Remember, this was before social media. Fans took to conventions, fan clubs, and sci-fi magazines to voice their outrage. Letters poured in to Starlog, Cine Fantastique, and 20th Century Fox demanding answers. To them, it wasn't just a creative choice, it was an insult to the emotional investment they'd made in Aliens. At early screenings, people reportedly gasped when they realized Hicks was gone. Not because of shock value, but because it hurt. Michael Biehn became a symbol of that anger. Reflectively, fans rallied around him, calling the decision lazy, heartless, and a betrayal to the characters James Cameron built. Even Sigourney Weaver, though proud of Ripley's journey, later admitted the tone of Alien 3 was a tough pill for audiences to swallow. And she wasn't wrong. Alien 3 made money, but the emotional fallout lingered. To many, Hicks and Newt's death stripped away the human warmth that made Alien so special. It was darker, colder, and not in a good way. And through all of it, Michael Biehn stayed silent in public, but privately, his frustration grew. He had no idea that the studio wasn't quite finished with Hicks, because soon they would come knocking, not to bring him back, but to use his face.
A few months after Alien 3 went into production, Michael Biehn got a call. Not from a director, not from a producer asking him to return, but from someone at Fox's legal department. They wanted permission to use his face. The studio planned to show Hicks's dead body, or what was left of it, inside a cryotube during an early sequence. They had built a prosthetic dummy of his head and torso, meant to represent the character's corpse, but they hadn't asked Biehn's permission beforehand. When he saw concept photos, he was furious. Not only had they killed off his character without warning, now they wanted to use his likeness for a corpse scene without paying him a dime. Biehn immediately contacted his agent and demanded compensation. What followed became one of the most talked about actor disputes in science fiction history. After negotiations, the studio ended up paying him a significant sum, reportedly almost as much as he earned for the entire role in Aliens. And even then, the image of the dummy was mostly cut from the final version of the movie. But the message was clear. Biehn wasn't going to let the studio profit off his image after discarding his character. For him, Hicks wasn't just a paycheck, he was personal. The soldier represented something pure, loyal, and human. Seeing that legacy reduced to a lifeless prop felt like an act of disrespect. And the truth was, the disrespect didn't end there.
Behind the scenes, Alien 3 was falling apart. Directors were quitting, scripts were being rewritten overnight, and chaos had become the new normal. It wasn't just Hicks who was lost. The entire movie was collapsing under the weight of its own confusion. By the time Alien 3 entered full production, the project had already become a nightmare. There wasn't just one version of the film, there were many. Writers came and went. William Gibson's cyberpunk version was scrapped. Eric Red's draft was abandoned. Vincent Ward's Wooden Planet idea collapsed after months of pre-production. Each new script tore down what came before it, until no one really knew what Alien 3 was supposed to be anymore. Fox executives, desperate to control the bleeding budget, began steering the film themselves. They wanted a darker, more philosophical movie, something closer to Ridley Scott's original Alien than James Cameron's Aliens. But that shift came with a cost. To them, Hicks and Newt symbolized the old story, the action sequel they were trying to move away from. Cutting them wasn't just a writing decision, it was corporate surgery. And then came David Fincher, a first-time featured director known only for his music videos. He walked straight into the storm. Imagine being 28 years old, handed a massive franchise, and told to make sense of 5 conflicting scripts and a production crew already exhausted. Fincher tried to shape the film into something meaningful, but Fox kept interfering. Sets were built and torn down. Whole scenes were rewritten mid-shoot. Actors were learning new dialogue on the day of filming. Meanwhile, Michael Biehn watched all of this from a distance, both frustrated and relieved. Frustrated that Hicks was gone, relieved that he wasn't part of the chaos consuming everyone on set. In later interviews, Fincher called the movie a lesson in frustration. He eventually disowned it, saying the studio destroyed his vision. And when fans asked Michael Biehn what he thought, his response was short but cutting. They killed the wrong people. It was a statement that carried more truth than anyone wanted to admit, because in their rush to reshape the franchise, the studio had accidentally killed its heart. When the dust finally settled, Alien 3 was released to mixed reviews and divided audiences. Critics praised its bleak atmosphere, but fans, especially those who loved Aliens, couldn't forgive the loss of Hicks and Newt. Michael Biehn, meanwhile, had moved on, but the bitterness lingered. He rarely spoke about the film publicly in the 1990s, but whenever the subject came up, you could feel the disappointment beneath his words. To him, Hicks represented hope, and hope had been snuffed out. Over the years, the alien community refused to let the character die. In comic books, video games, and even novel adaptations, Corporal Hicks was resurrected. In Aliens: Colonial Marines, Biehn actually returned to voice the character, giving fans the closure the movies never did. But despite the fan revival, the original wound never quite healed. Hicks's off-screen death became one of the most infamous decisions in franchise history, a textbook case of how Hollywood politics can crush storytelling potential. In interviews, Biehn admitted he didn't hold grudges against the actors or crew. His frustration was directed squarely at the executives who, as he put it, didn't understand what made the last film special. And maybe he was right. Because for many fans, Aliens wasn't just about monsters or explosions. It was about connection. The bond between Ripley, Newt, and Hicks gave the chaos meaning. Remove that bond, and what's left feels hollow. Still, Biehn's legacy as Hicks endures.
His performance continues to inspire fan art, cosplay, and tributes nearly 4 decades later. Younger fans discover Aliens and immediately ask the same question: why didn't Hicks survive? The answer is buried somewhere between studio politics, creative fear, and corporate ego. But what remains clear, even now, is that Michael Biehn never truly forgave them. Not for killing Hicks, not for killing Hope. In the end, Alien 3 became one of Hollywood's most haunting what-ifs. What if Hicks had lived? What if Biehn had taken the lead? Would the Alien saga have evolved into something even greater? Or was the darkness of Alien 3 always inevitable? What we do know is this. Michael Biehn's Corporal Hicks remains one of the most respected and beloved characters in science fiction history, a soldier with courage, heart, and humanity. And maybe that's why his absence in Alien 3 still hurts. It wasn't just the death of a character, it was the death of what made aliens truly human. For Biehn, the experience became a lifelong reminder of how quickly Hollywood can turn loyalty into loss. And for fans, it became a lesson that sometimes the heroes we lose off-screen leave the deepest scars of all. So, what do you think? Did the studio make the right call, or did they rob the franchise of its soul when they erased Hicks? Tell us your thoughts down below, because your voice keeps these stories alive. If you enjoyed this story and want more untold Hollywood truths, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more videos just like this right here on Retro Celeb Talk, where the legends live and the truth finally gets told.